Hi, I'm Danielle Gagne from Commercial UAV News, and today I'm talking with Meghan, public elementary school teacher at Cabell School District. Hi, Megan. How are you today?
Hi, I'm doing great. How are you doing?
You're great. I am so excited about talking about how you're bringing drones into the classroom. So, what brought you to drones?
About 3 or 4 years ago, a good friend of mine approached me and he said, I have some technology I would like to share in your classroom. And I am always really open to trying new things in my classroom. And he brought in a drone. And at that point, I was like, what in the world is this thing? And I immediately I thought, I was like, this is like a flying robot. What is this? But my students, they immediately knew what it was. And I saw them take the technology just like second nature. And I knew at that point, I'm like, I got to get some of these for my classroom. So since that point, I've had to write a lot of grants, independent grants to get these things for my classrooms. But about 3 or 4 years ago is when I was first introduced to them, and I had no idea what in the world they were. But I saw the impact that technology had onto my students and their interest level, and I was like, I really need to integrate this in my classroom. So I did it.
What do you think your role is in the drone industry?
I think one of the biggest impacts that I've had on the industry is I am kind of someone who said this the other day, kind of like a unicorn in the drone world. And I said, what in the world is that? But not a lot of teachers or a lot of people implement drones at the elementary level for younger students. And I didn't realize just how different what I'm doing with my students is opposed to using this with middle school or high school students. And that really, when somebody said that to me, it really kind of made an impact. And I'm like, you know what? I'm from a very small town. I live in a city under 50,000 people, and I've been building my own curriculum. Like I said, 3 or 4 years ago, I had no idea what a drone was. And since that point, I'm kind of known as that drone lady now as the teacher. And I think that me personally having an impact on younger students and integrating drones and technology in the classroom at a younger age, I think that kind of makes me stand out. And I didn't realize just how innovative, what I'm doing with younger students, how that's made an impact on the drone industry.
Younger generation needs to kind of grow up with this. It's kind of like the computer. I remember in second grade, I got on a computer and that just changed
Yeah.
everything for me.
Yeah, you're just like, what
So
is this? Yeah, and that was like
yeah,
before. I'm thinking like before the internet. I remember I was like, well, what's the internet? I couldn't imagine living without it now.
exactly, exactly. So what are you most looking forward to seeing happen in the coming years, especially with this program?
What I really hope to happen with drones is, well, let me back up a second. When I incorporate drones in my classroom with the younger students, I really focus on the positive impacts that drones can have to make our lives better. We do talk about how drones can be used in warfare and things like that, but that's just a disclaimer that I use with my kids. I'm like, this is not where we're going to focus on. We're not using this to hurt other people. We are using this technology, and I want you to think about the types of things that drones can be used in the future to help humanity. A few years ago, I had my students, I remember I keep all of their work because they all have their independent portfolios. And I was looking at some of my students' work, and one of the essay questions was, where do you think drones will be 2 or 3 years from now? And I was looking through those things. A lot of the stuff that my students have predicted have come to pass. So, one, I remember a student he said, I believe drones are going to be used to help save people from drowning. And now if you look in a lot of beaches, they have, you're implementing using drones to drop life preservers for someone who could be caught in a riptide. And not only does that, help the victim, it also helps the lifeguard from being in danger too. So there's a lot of things that my students had predicted, and I'm like, wow, all of those things are coming to pass. So as far as in my classroom, like I said, I really focus on the importance of the positive aspects of drones and how they can affect the future. Because I tell my kids all the time, like, even though you're young, there's so many things that you're going to be able to do with this technology, even if it's not flying a drone. It could have something to do with coding. It could have something to do with flying a drone, or it could have to do with research. But I always want to make sure that there's a positive impact with integrating drones into our classroom.
So what are some of the challenges you've had to overcome learning to work with drones?
The first challenge that I had was probably the monetary aspect, because I do work in public school and funding is little or null to come by. You know, you look at teachers a lot of times and you get like $200 supplies for your classroom for the entire year. You know, or some districts, some states have a little more, a little less, but that doesn't really include buying drones. So you have to, if you want to do something like this, well, when I started it, when I wanted to do something like this, I had to write independent grants. So that was my first challenge. My second challenge was to not be afraid of the technology, because I never used this before. And I was like, when I thought of a drone, I thought this giant thing that was going to kill my children. But I also learned that, you know, there are little mini drones you can use to teach the same things that these big expensive drones do. And the third challenge would be for me to step back and realize that my students are better at this than I am. I think, yeah, I mean, I think as a teacher and an educator, we kind of have to let our egos to the side and say, you know what, I am not the expert on this. I'm an expert at teaching children. I know what I'm doing with that. You know, I went to school, but as far as this technology goes, my students are better at it than I am. And in saying that, I really need to use, well, number one, up front, tell the kids, I'm like, hey, if you want to do this, we're all learning this together, because that's a huge, huge thing in my classroom. I tell my students, my big motto is, number one, unless your name's Google, stop acting like you know everything. That's my first one. And then number two, when I tell my students in the classroom my teaching philosophy, they say, oh, you know, there's like, that's horrible, Mrs. Salter. Why would you tell this to us? And my big teaching philosophy is, in my classroom, I want you to fail. And they immediately, you know, you think of that and you're just like, oh my gosh, this teacher wants me to fail. And, you know, I talk to the kids, be like, I want you to fail because that's how you learn with things. And that's how you grow as a person. And my classroom is a safe place to fail. So I think the third challenge for me, with understanding that I'm going to fail at this in front of my students, and for it to be okay, and I do not have to be perfect, and understanding that they know this stuff better than I do, was a huge barrier to overcome, because unless you're willing to do that and be open, you know, it's going to be hard to integrate in your classroom, and it's not going to be as fun. But I can look at stuff with my students and I'll be sitting here trying to figure out how coding works, and I'm like, oh, I can't do this. And I'll have to research and research and research. And I can ask a student, they pick it up, and like they show me how to do it like that. So I think it's just a difference in ages as far as integrating technology at a younger age. So it's looking back and using the resources that you have and giving the students an input and giving them a part of the, you know, the curriculum in your classroom, and letting them be the teacher too and teach you.
That's really exciting to hear that you're giving that message at such a young age. It's okay to fail.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's such an important thing, and so that's such a wonderful message.
I think too, adding on that, sorry, that
Yeah.
I think with gender issues with technology, a lot of time girls are afraid to try the technology, because a lot of times people look at it like, technology, this is a boys thing. It's okay for boys to mess up. This is what they do. This is, you know, this is what they're really into. But as a girl, being afraid to fail at the technology, it seems like there's more at stake. You're afraid to mess up with something like technology or coding or things like that, because that's it's an area where boys are supposed to excel in. And if you don't excel in it yourself as a female, you look down on yourself and saying that you're not good enough, when really you are.
And you know, I think it's kind of the way that we talk to boys versus girls. The girls are always good girls, and the boys are always rough and tumble, and we create these characterizations of gender that starts off at a very young age. And so boys are like, I can fail, I can fall over, I can scuff my knees, and that's okay. Where girls are like, I have to be good, and that translates to I have to be perfect and all the time.
It's really interesting too to watch. I don't mean to get off topic here, but to watch the difference between how boys and girls learn. So when I bring drones into my classroom, a lot of times I always like to start and I put the boys on the teams and the girls on the team, and I give them a task, something to do. And it's always really interesting to watch. The girls are very precise with what they do. They sit and they watch. So the boys, a lot of times, they're just like, let's build it bigger, better, and they've got this stuff and they automatically just go and they're like, they crash stuff, but they're not afraid to do that. The girls sit back and they watch the boys and they watch their failings and then they improve upon it and then they do it. And usually they succeed first. So it's really interesting as far as, I don't know if the girls are afraid to fail or they just like sitting back and watching the boys fail and then, and then doing better than
their
them.
mistakes.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really important thing because when we're talking about bringing more women into this industry, we have to talk about those hangups, and I think it does start at a young age.
It really, I've seen it start about when the students are going to middle school. That's when it really starts.
I agree. So who or what has inspired you and why?
I would probably say my students, and I don't mean that to be a cliche answer, but that is the reason that I'm continuing to do this, because I see the spark, the interest that they get in using this technology. I do other things in my classroom than just drones, but that is a key part of the curriculum that I've created. And it's something for my students to look forward to. So where I'm a gifted education teacher, I provide enrichment for my kids. So they're in the regular ed classroom 4 out of 5 days per week. And they come, and it's a special day for them to come and see me. And we get to do things like drones. So that's a very important thing for them to be able to do. And it sparks their interest in a way that, I've never really paid attention to until I've, stopped and I look back and I analyze how these kids are solving these problems or the types of things that they're going to be doing in the future. So really, what inspires me are my students and what I hope that they're going to do in the future. And, I just want my classroom to be a positive place for them to fail and for them to learn. And hopefully, even though they're younger kids, they can look at some of the things that we've done and maybe say, you know what, you inspired me to go this career path in the future. You inspired me to do this. Even though as a teacher, we always want that, oh my gosh, that one kid to be like, you inspired me, you changed my life. But, in reality, every day in a classroom, it's not that simple. But my students really inspire me because they're willing to take chances, they're willing to try, and they're willing to have fun, and they're willing to teach me. And most importantly, I'm willing to learn from them.
How has the industry been able to support you in developing programs like this?
Industry has been able to support me, number one, because of networking that I've experienced the past few years. My first 2 years using drones in the classroom, I had zero resources. I created everything myself. So I remember when I first started, there was one lesson plan that I found online integrating drones into the classroom. And as a teacher, it's very scary to not have that teacher's guide in front of you because you're creating everything yourself. And me not being the expert on something like that, that's kind of terrifying in a way. It's also, exciting because you're doing something innovative and you're changing things. But that's a huge part in, being afraid of trying something new. But as far as support, it's really been networking. And last year, I was named for Women in Drones, Women to Watch Education Honoree. And that has changed, how people are contacting me with what I'm doing. Because before, I had zero contacts with stuff. I had no idea that there were other people out there that have been doing the same thing, even though very, very few are doing it on the elementary level. But getting all this contacts and people that are willing to share ideas, no matter where they are globally, willing to share ideas, all to benefit, whether it's students or just humanity in general. So it's just having those contacts and people who are experts that are willing to help each other.
That's fantastic. And you bring up a really good point. You kind of have to network in order to figure this stuff out. And if you're trying to do this all in a bubble, it doesn't quite take off the ground like it really needs to. And we need more people like you bringing these drones into the classroom, We need the industry to come in as well. And that kind of goes to my next question. How can the industry bring this to the next level to support young girls in the industry, or to start learning about drones? And when I talk about the next level, how do you define that?
Well, I think to take it to the next level, to really encourage girls, I think continue doing what we're doing, because I think that the past few years, just the shift in breaking those gender barriers has been huge compared. I remember I graduated, let's see, I'm 2002, so I'm 36 years old. I remember growing up, I grew up in a very small town, and I always knew, my parents always said, you're going to go to college, you're going to go to college. But I live in a very poverty stricken area, and there's not a lot of options for students, or they don't know the type of careers, the type of things that they could do. I remember, there were other careers available, but I remember it was just basically a lot of people were saying, do you want to be, when you grow up, do you want to be a teacher, a nurse, or a secretary? And that is, I'm not saying that people were like, purposely putting me in those gender roles, but that's what women did. And I'm not, I'm 36 years old, but I didn't know what an engineer was until I went to college. I thought an engineer was someone who drove a train, because where I live, that's all an engineer is. So exposing the students where I live to this technology, or the type of careers that they could do, I think it's very important. And that's what makes me so passionate, is because I want to give these kids the experiences that I didn't get, or the support that I didn't get. Because there is so much potential in what they can do. And just because they're from Appalachia, they might have grown up in poverty and things like that, that does not define them. And there's a lot of great things that they can do. And as far as, keeping girls interested in, I think we just need to keep doing what we're doing as far as encouraging girls into STEM. But as far as the way, girls and boys learn and do things, it is completely different. But I think continuing doing what we're doing, and just encouraging girls, and just keeping it, positive. I love seeing all the hashtags with like girls who code, drone girls, and all those things, and giving the girls a place, a safe place, especially to do these things and to learn and to have that female companionship. I think is very important, because developing positive role models and just having that support there is going to make a huge change. And one more thing I always like to say is, I'm very glad that as a society we're really starting to embrace girls with integrating this technology, or encouraging females to go in a lot of male dominated careers, because as a society we're wasting over half of our population by putting females in a gender box, by saying, hey, you want the typical career of a secretary, a nurse, a teacher, and there's nothing wrong with being those things. But also there's a lot of females out there that could do the same things that males do, and they're just not encouraged to do it. So hopefully I'm a positive role model to my kids, especially my girls, with being like, you know what, you can do these things, you just have to believe in yourself.
The final question is, what are some things we can start doing today to get more women into the drone industry in the future?
I think some of the things that we're already doing, again, I said that a minute ago, but just having awareness of it. I'm just amazed by the past year how many people have been reaching out to me, and I've been doing some panels with drones and different things like that. But just keeping up with the networking, encouraging a voice for females. And I think it's great that a lot of males are reaching out and be like, you know what, this girl's an expert on what she does, and let's ask her for her ideas or for her opinions. And just the awareness of, like what you're doing right now, as far as like interviewing females, because there's so many different aspects that go into this. So keeping up the awareness, encouraging, having good role models, having the networking, all those things are great. And I feel like we're moving in a very positive direction. But also, keeping girls, especially younger girls, when they start hitting middle school, not dumbing themselves down. I see that happen. I saw that transition this year, about right when they're going into middle school, the girls stop raising their hands. They not that they don't know the answers, but they stop wanting to stand out as that smart girl because that's supposed to be what boys do. They're, they're rambunctious. They're the ones who want to answer the questions. And just helping to break those stereotypes and encouraging girls and, being positive with it and, giving them opportunities and letting them know the things that they can do. So I think we're doing a, pretty stellar job at it. I'm not saying we can't improve, but I think that things like this and just networking and stuff is really making a huge difference.
Thank you, Meghan, for joining me today.
Sure. Thank you for having me.